I was not supposed to be listening to anything that night. Night watch at Ferris Reach means you mind the live boards, the modern relays, the ones with names and jurisdictions and a chain of command that goes all the way up to people who can end your career with a signature. What you do not mind is the relic trunk, the sealed line in the back rack that nobody has touched since the joint charting mission folded 2 generations ago. It is not live. It is not supposed to be live. It is furniture. I tapped it because I was bored, and because 3 years of night watch teaches you that boredom is the only enemy that never rotates off shift with you. Ferris Reach is not a glamorous posting. It is a converted charting hub bolted to an asteroid nobody named, kept alive because it sits in the shadow of 3 dead systems, Earth quarantined before I was born, and never got around to decommissioning. My board that night showed the usual nothing: a handful of civilian freight lanes, a weather buoy chattering to itself. The relic rack sat behind me the whole shift, humming a half-tone lower than everything else, the way old hardware does, when it has decided to keep working long after anyone stopped expecting it to. The trunk was not dead, it was old, and it was quiet, and underneath the quiet it was carrying traffic, thin, encrypted, looping past our relay, the way water finds a crack in a foundation nobody inspects anymore. I sat with it for 4 nights before I understood what I was hearing. It was not a broadcast. It was a command chain, someone else's command chain, threading through hardware their side had forgotten still touched ours. I should have logged it and closed the channel. That is what the cordon protocol requires of anyone who finds a live signal on a decommissioned line touching a quarantined system. Flag it, seal it, report it to someone whose job is to decide, formally and slowly, whether it is worth an official response. I know exactly how it is worded. I did not do what it says. I listened instead, and what I heard over those 4 nights was a world going out like a lamp with the oil cut low. Their sun had been gone for 3 years by their own reckoning, not extinguished, but buried, under a dust column that never settled, thrown up by something in their own geology, or their own war, I never learned which. Their command traffic did not care about causes anymore. It cared about triage. A garrison governor named Austin Vray was running ration tickets for what he called the fever season, and the fever season was not seasonal. It was in its 3rd year, and it was still killing people in numbers. His own officers reported in a clipped, careful shorthand, designed to keep the true count off any line that might be intercepted by their own population. I am not an intelligence officer. I am a communications technician who reads maintenance manuals for a hobby. But I recognized the shape of what they were describing. The fever pattern, the secondary respiratory collapse, the way it moved through close quarters and stalled in open air, because it matched, almost line for line, a synthesis protocol Earth had shelved 40 years ago after our own outbreak on the Kessel colonies. We had cured it, we had written it down, and put it in an archive nobody has opened since, because the disease it cured no longer exists on any world we still talk to. Governor Vray's traffic that 4th night denied a relief requisition from a border district called Second Hollow, not for lack of medicine, for lack of authorization to admit, on any record, that Second Hollow needed it. The district commander who filed the request signed off with a line I have not been able to put down since. We are not asking for rescue, only for the truth to be permitted to travel as far as it needs to. I sat with that line for a long time. I want to be honest about what those 4 nights actually felt like, because it was not heroic, and it was not clean. It was a man in a chair in a cold room, cycling the same 40 minutes of chatter through a translation script, never built for this dialect, catching maybe 1 word in 3, and filling the rest in from context, the way you fill in the missing floorboards of a house you have never entered. I built Second Hollow in my head out of ration ticket numbers, and a district commander's clipped shorthand. I do not know if it has trees, or if its fever season turns the sky a color, or only ever the color of the dust that never settles. I built a place out of grief I could only half translate, and decided, on the strength of it, to spend 11 clean years of a service record on a stranger I would never meet. That is the part no report will ever carry, not the decision itself, the arithmetic underneath it, how little I actually knew, and how certain I was anyway. The cordon protocol exists for a good reason. Quarantined systems stay quarantined, because contact is how plagues cross the dark between worlds, and because a war we do not understand can swallow a rescue party as easily as it can swallow a plague. I have never once thought the reasoning was wrong, but the protocol does not tell you what to do with a cure sitting in an archive and a district commander begging his own government to let a number be true. It does not have a line item for that. So I broke it. Quietly, alone, with no authorization but my own poor judgment, a phrase I expect to hear read back to me in a review board someday, and will not argue with. I did not send a ship, or a request up my own chain. My chain would have taken the correct amount of time to decide the correct thing, and the correct amount of time was longer than Second Hollow had left. I built a single packet, the Kessel synthesis schema, stripped of anything that would identify its origin, and underneath it, the coordinates of an old joint charting depot half a system away, a supply cache from the original survey mission that neither government had bothered to declassify or destroy. It still held medical stores. I checked our own moldering inventory twice to be sure, then threaded the packet down the dead trunk line, into the crack in their foundation, and let it go. No fleet, no escort, no message that said who had sent it or why. Just the schema and the coordinates, and 4 words at the top that I have gone back and forth on, including ever since. Use this. Good luck. I logged nothing. I told no one. I went off shift and slept for 11 hours, and came back expecting either silence or the beginning of the end of my career. What I got, 3 nights later, riding back up the same dead trunk on a frequency no one should have known to answer on, was a single fragment of their internal traffic, not addressed to us, never meant to reach us, but leaking the way everything on that line leaked. An intelligence officer named Cyril Kaeth had been assigned to trace the packet's origin, because someone in Vray's command had noticed the depot's stores had been quietly drawn down, and the fever numbers at Second Hollow had, against every trend, begun to fall. Her report said what mine would have said in her position. No outbound request matched the packet's arrival. No ally, no faction, no debt owed by treaty could account for it. She wrote, in language colder than mine but carrying the same weight, that whoever had answered had not been asked, had not been owed, and had not left a name. She flagged it for further inquiry and closed the file, because a war-rationed government has no bandwidth to chase a gift it cannot explain, and does not officially believe in. I read her report the way you read a letter that was never sent to you, because it was never sent to me. There was no anger in it, only the flat procedural puzzlement of someone whose job depends on every effect having a traceable cause, confronted with one that had none she could reach. She had run the depot's ownership records back 3 administrations. She had checked every treaty her government still honored, and several it had let lapse. She found nothing, because I had made sure there was nothing to find, and reading her careful, dead-end diligence felt less like victory than like watching someone search a room for a door I had already locked from my side. I closed the channel that night and sealed the trunk properly, the way the protocol should have had me do from the start, and I filed nothing, because there is nothing in any form on this station for what actually happened. I still stand watch some nights and think about Second Hollow, a place I will never see, run by people whose faces I have never seen, saved in part by an archive Earth forgot it had, and a line I was never supposed to be listening to. I do not know if Governor Vray ever learned where the medicine came from. I do not know if Cyril Kaeth ever closed her file for good, or if it sits open somewhere still, waiting on an answer that will never come from any address she can trace. I know only that the call was never meant for us, and that I answered it anyway, and that some nights that is the only entry in the log that matters, even though it is the one entry that was never written down at all.